So thank you to the Institute and the committee for having me today. I'll tell you a little bit about KIND, and then my presentation, I'm going to kind of talk about the refugee situation we have in our own hemisphere and what the United States is doing or not doing in response. So KIND, Kids in Need of Defense, is the largest national organization that works to ensure that no refugee or immigrant child faces immigration court alone. Now, we do this in partnership with over 300 law firms, corporate legal departments, law schools, and bar associations who all provide pro bono services to children who've been referred to court or who are in removal proceedings. KIND has been referred more than 10,000 children since we opened our doors in 2009, and we've trained over 12,000 pro bono attorneys. We also help children who are returning to their home country through deportation or voluntary departure to do so safely and to reintegrate in their home communities. Through our pilot project in Guatemala, we place children with our non-governmental organization partners in country who provide vital social services, including family reunification, school enrollment, skills training, and counseling. KIND also advocates to change the law, policy, and practice to improve the protection of unaccompanied children in the United States, in their home country, and throughout their journey to seek safety. Now, although KIND represents children from all over the world, the vast majority of our clients are coming from Central America. Almost 2 years ago, in June 2014, President Obama referred to the unprecedented numbers of children and families fleeing violence in Central America and arriving at the southern border as an urgent humanitarian crisis. Now, prior to 2014, the number of unaccompanied children at our border was a pretty steady number. It was between 6,000 and 8,000 kids every year. The numbers started increasing in 2012 and have steadily grown ever since. The peak was in 2014, where 68,000 unaccompanied children were apprehended on the U.S.-Mexico border, and this year is already on track to be as high or as higher than in 2014. Now, why are the children coming? Now, they're continuing to come because the root causes of their flight, which is increasing and pervasive gang and narco-trafficking violence in Central America, have not been addressed. Crime and gang violence in these countries have escalated to such a degree that they make life virtually unbearable. Now, previously, youth gangs used a variety of tactics to put pressure on kids to join. Now it's a join or die. For years, there have been problems with corrupt police officers. However, now, because of weak rule of law in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, many police units are effectively controlled by gangs. Gangs have been increasingly begun targeting children at their schools to prevent children whose families have resources to send them to school from even being able to attend. Right now, El Salvador has one of the lowest school attendance rates in Latin America. Over the past few years, Honduras has become one of the most dangerous countries in the world. It has the highest murder rate in the world, which is about approximately 84 murders for every 100,000 people. Now, to give you context, in the United States, it's 4. San Pedro Sula, it's a city in the northern part of Honduras, is the most dangerous city in Latin America. Following the Honduran coup in 2009, Mexican cartels moved in to fill the power void in Honduras, and as part of their infiltration, they have recruited children to carry out kidnappings, extortion, and murder. Guatemala not only faces similar problems with gangs and Mexican cartels moving south from Mexico into northern Guatemala, it has recently suffered from poor harvests that have exacerbated food insecurity and vulnerabilities of poorer children. Many children in Central America have a parent who's living here in the United States. Having a family member in the U.S. sometimes puts a child at a higher risk of extortion from gangs. Gangs assume that the parent in the U.S. has the ability to send large amounts of dollars to their child, so gangs target and extort these children. Girls report to us facing similar reasons for migrating, but also they face rape and gender-based violence in their home countries. Gangs and drug traffickers are increasingly recruiting girls to smuggle and sell drugs using gang rape as a means of forcing them into compliance. Gangs also use the threat of rape as a tactic to gain money through extortion and kidnapping. Worse yet, if a girl is impregnated, the gangs will leave the girl to raise the child, but they tell her that they'll come back to take that child to be part of the gang when it's old enough. Children referred to kind are describing violence inflicted upon them as even more harrowing than we have ever heard before. Kind is regularly receiving referrals for children who have endured viscerally shocking incidents of cruelty and we have seen more young children and more girls who have been raped or sexually assaulted, often numerous times, and more gang sexual violence against boys. Now, the number of children coming alone to the United States slightly declined in 2015, only because of increased enforcement efforts in Mexico, supported by the United States, as well as in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, that prevented the children from reaching the US border. Smugglers have also changed their routes to evade increased security. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of violence and economic hardship that's pushing the children to the US. And this is important because US asylum law often differentiates between economic hardship and violence and persecution in considering the merits of an asylum application. The root causes of migration are often a complex set of consideration a person makes when deciding to leave their home and everything they have ever known. Even where economic hardship is a factor in pushing someone from her home country, it is often closely connected to or caused by violent conditions. So we must appreciate the connection between the economic hardships these individuals have endured and the violence in the individual's home country. This will often be relatively easy to do, since for many individuals fleeing Central America, the two issues of violence and economic hardship go hand in hand. Violence causes economic hardship, and economic hardship in turn produces more violence. For example, many children in El Salvador do not attain education beyond the 7th grade because traveling to some schools requires crossing gang borders, with girls especially at risk of being attacked or raped, and a lack of schooling clearly leads to lost economic opportunity. The well-documented and measurable impact that violence has on the economies of Central America, on the Central American countries, further supports the notion that the violence and economic hardship that migrants suffer are intertwined. The World Bank has concluded that violence in Central America has led to staggering economic costs. And according to the World Bank, crime and violence also impede economic growth and results in governments allocating scarce federal resources towards law enforcement activities rather than to investments that would promote economic growth. Although American asylum law distinguishes between the threat of persecution and economic hardship, the reality is not so simple for those fleeing Central America. Despite the clear indicators that the flow of women and children from Central America is mostly that of refugees, the Obama administration continues to send mixed messages in response. The administration has taken some positive steps that we see as a slow recognition that this is a predominantly refugee flow coming out of Central America. One example is that they have created the Central American Minors Program, and that's the ability of a child who's in Central America to apply for refugee status and ask to be resettled in the United States. Additionally, the president asked Congress to authorize $1 billion to help in aid in the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala to increase security and ensure that children don't have to leave their homes. All of that was happening while at the same time the president was trying to send a message of deterrence, trying to deter children and women with their children from coming here in the first place. The ways of doing this was the administration increased detention. So the Obama administration reopened a practice that had been ended of family detention. So locking up women with their children in detention facilities. They expedited court proceedings for the certain subset of population. So for recent arrivals from Central America, their court hearings were expedited so that they could be ordered removed and deported much more quickly. The idea, again, being that people who are deported are going to be sending a message to their families and their friends in their home country, don't come here, it's not worth it, you'll just be deported. And finally, you may have heard in the news just this week that the administration is again reviving this practice of raids. So going after specifically, again, this refugee population, so women and children from Central America who came here seeking protection, to go after them, so waking them up very early in the morning, knocking on their doors in order to deport them back to their home country, all with an intention of sending a message. Now, the United States must make a serious commitment to addressing the root causes of this new migratory pattern. These Central American countries in our backyard are the source of a humanitarian crisis. So instead of thinking about this as a migration issue, which I think this administration has predominantly done, we need to treat it like a humanitarian refugee crisis. We need to be using the same kind of vocabulary that we're accustomed to hearing about the other crises around the world, and talking about these kids not as illegal immigrants, but rather as child soldiers, victims of war, and people who need our care. When the story of the lost boys escaping violence in Sudan was told, they were heralded for their bravery. So books were written, we saw movies about them, and the media painted very sympathetic portraits of them. And the United States chose to welcome them with open arms. And when these lost boys and girls from Central America, who possess equal amounts of strength, valor, and grit in the face of terrible situations, we've been treating them as illegal aliens. And I think the United States can do better than that. Thanks.